The old man refused to sell his land for years, but when developers entered his house, they understood why. Edward was 70 years and lived alone on a small green field in the middle of a growing city. Around him, tall gray buildings filled the skyline, but his land stayed untouched. It looked out of place, bright green and full of life. For years, housing companies tried to buy it. They offered him money, gifts, even promises of a luxury apartment. But Edward always said no. He did not give a reason. He just shook his head and closed the door. People called him stubborn, strange, even crazy. Some thought he just liked the attention. Others believed he had something to hide. One day, a new team of developers came with a different plan. They weren't loud or pushy. They showed up without suits, just wanting to talk. To everyone's surprise, Edward opened the door and let them in. But what they learned inside shocked them. Before we start our story, let us know in the comments where you're watching from and what time you found this video. Inside the house, it was quiet, clean, but very strange. Each room looked like no one had touched it for years. One room was painted bright pink and filled with stuffed rabbits sitting on the bed and shelves. Another room looked like a garden, with green plants and colorful butterflies flying around. There was also a room stacked with old newspapers. The developers stared at each other, confused. One whispered, "Who could live here?" Edward slowly led them to a small room at the back of the house. It was his study, filled with books, old pictures, and papers. He sat down in a wooden chair and looked at them with tired eyes. His voice was soft as he spoke. "There is no one else here," he said. "It is only me." The men asked about the pink room, the garden room, and the piles of newspapers. Edward's eyes filled with tears. He picked up a dusty old newspaper and handed it to them. The front page showed a story from many years ago. The headline told of a terrible car accident. Edward's wife, Clara, and his children had died. He was the only one who survived. Every room in the house was for Edward's family. The pink room was for his daughter, Lily, who loved stuffed bunnies. The garden room was for his wife, Clara, who loved flowers and butterflies. His son, Michael's science room was upstairs with his projects and books. Edward never changed anything. He wanted to keep their memory alive forever. The developers grew quiet. They now understood that this house was not just a piece of land. It was the only thing Edward had left. Then one of them, a young man named Lucas, spoke up. He told Edward they did not want to build houses anymore. Instead, they wanted to make a park, a peaceful place filled with trees, flowers, and nature. The house would remain standing in the middle. Edward asked softly, "Will it feel like the old forest again?" Lucas answered, "Yes, it will feel like home." Edward thought for a long time. Then, for the first time in years, he gave a small smile. He agreed to their plan. Months later, the park was finished. It was full of trees, ponds, and the sound of birds. Edward still lived in his house, but now children played nearby. One afternoon, he sat outside his home, watching kids laugh in the park. A little boy named Jack kicked a ball toward him. Edward kicked it back with a smile. Jack's mother, Julia, walked over and thanked him. She had already heard Edward's story in the news and knew the pain he carried. Julia was also alone, raising Jack by herself. With kindness in her eyes, she offered Edward something more than help. She asked him to share a life together. Edward looked at Julia and her son. For the first time, it felt as if his own family had returned. Slowly, he allowed her into his heart. And from that day, the old house was filled with joy once again.